Okay, so now let's go into a little bit more detail about Ethernet. So when you're dealing with the world of Ethernet, one thing that's very important to understand is this concept of broadcast and collision domains. So what is a broadcast domain? A broadcast domain, sort of very simply put, is this. When you put data onto a wire, all the people that see that data, they're in the same broadcast domain. Well, let's take it a step further. We haven't really talked about this concept of what a broadcast is yet. In all my examples I gave you on the whiteboards, I've been showing you examples of what I call unicast data. Unicast is when one device is sending data to one other device, one-to-one transmission. That's unicast. Well, broadcast, we can probably figure out what that is, right? Think about broadcast television, right? Broadcast television back in the days before we had cable and digital TV, what was it? These TV stations would have these huge transmitters and just broadcast it out into the air. It was going to everybody, right? Anybody who wanted to pick it up could pick it up. That's a broadcast. It's one to everybody. So when a device such as a laptop or a smartphone or a PC creates a piece of data, we know that it has to address that data. At layer 2, it needs to put a MAC address on there. And at layer 3, if that data actually has some layer 3 component, it has to put some layer 3 address in there. Well, those addresses could indicate if this data is going to one device only, or an address could be a broadcast address, meaning I want everybody to pick this up. So a broadcast domain really is, if I put a broadcast on the wire, if I fashion my frame in such a way that it's going to everybody, who is everybody? What is that group of devices that will see that broadcast? Even if they're not interested in it, where are all the NIC cards that will receive it? That is a broadcast domain. A collision domain. Now we know that, I've talked about this a little bit before, that the Ethernet was developed as a shared medium. In other words, this Dr. Robert Metcalfe, when he designed Ethernet, he said, I'm going to design it in such a way that I got one cable and I can have multiple devices tapped into this cable that can use this cable. He said, but if I have that, how do I ensure these devices don't interrupt each other, step on each other's toes? Well, there's a variety of ways to do that, right? There's a lot of networking mediums out there that could carry the data from multiple different things. And how do you answer that question? For example, think about cable television, right? You've got one cable going into your cable box, and yet that one cable is transmitting simultaneously possibly hundreds of channels. Have you ever really thought about how it's doing that? Well, it's because each one of those channels is on a different frequency. It's like if you're in your car, right? If you're in your car and you're listening to the radio, you can only tune in to one frequency at a time and listen to it. But does that mean your radio is only receiving one frequency? No. That means in the air, you're getting all the radio stations at once. But by tuning into a particular frequency, you're saying, I want to filter out all those other ones. I don't care about those, and I only want to listen to this one. That's one way. If you've got a networking medium that's going to have multiple devices on it, that's one way you could solve that problem. Let's just give every device a unique frequency, and then they can all talk at once. Well, Dr. Robert Metcalfe said, no, I'm not going to do that. That's too difficult, and I don't know how many devices I'm going to have, and don't want to do that. So he said, well, instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it this way. Only one device can talk at a time. But when that one device is talking, it has full control over that wire. All the bandwidth available on that wire belongs to that one device that's transmitting. So there are certain rules put into place, so we're going to see this in a minute, about how do we try to ensure that. But sometimes devices step on each other's toes in Ethernet. And two devices or three devices might start transmitting a frame at exactly the same time, and that's against the rules. That's not supposed to happen. And that will cause what's called a collision. That means their electrical signals, their voltage changes will run into each other on the wire and become just meaningless electrical garbage doesn't even look like an Ethernet frame anymore. So we call that a collision. So a collision domain, just like a broadcast domain, is when a collision happens, what are those devices that actually have visibility to it? So we've talked a little bit about this. How do you send traffic on a wire that everyone can access at the same time? Well, what I just described when I was talking about your cable TV and how your cable box is actually receiving all the channels at once, just on different frequencies. The technical term for that is frequency division multiplexing, FDM. Another way of doing it is time division multiplexing. Time division multiplexing means that you take a block of time, like let's say a minute, and you cut up into little discrete chunks, and everybody has a reserved time slot. So I might say, okay, in this minute, from 0 to 10 seconds, John, you can talk. Okay, from 11 seconds to 20 seconds, Sally, you can talk. So John, for every minute, your time slot is from 0 to 10 seconds. That's your time slot. So by taking 1 minute, I'm dividing it up in time. We call that time division multiplexing. Obviously, I just mentioned, Ethernet does not do that either. Some wide area network protocols, that's how they operate.